The implications of the new Pope Francis on social issues. I'm Marcus Mabry for the New York Times. Here with me now is Monsignor Rick Hilgardner with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and Jeff Stone of Dignity USA. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here this morning.
Morning. Thank you.
We were just saying, this is a surprising choice of a new Pope. This name was not one circulating out there widely. What's your reaction this morning?
Well, it had circulated early on and was immediately discounted because of his age, primarily, not that we're into ageism, because it has been widely speculated that Cardinal Bergoglio was a candidate, was basically the runner-up, for lack of a better word, to Pope Benedict in 2005.
The last conclave.
So my sense is they look at him as a man of humility, who's been a great pastor, who in the midst of accurately and staunchly defending the faith in a rather traditional way, has done so with a great sense of care, a great sense of compassion. And there are all these images that are starting to circulate widely in social media already. Images of him riding the bus, the stories of him going out in the morning to get his newspaper, even the story of him last night after he was elected, instead of going in a separate papal car back to the residence where all the cardinals were, he rode on the bus with the cardinals.
Right. We've talked about the significance, obviously the first Jesuit Pope, the first Latin American Pope. Is there also significance, this is a pastoral Pope, a Pope who really has emphasized kind of the church's working with the poor. Is there an attempt by the cardinals to reconnect with the faithful?
I think so. I mean, there's certainly been a call among the cardinals for some structural reform in terms of the governance of the church and some issues with the curia where there's some things that need to happen. It'll remain to be seen how quickly he's able to come in and do that, because he's never worked in the Vatican. So he really comes in as an outsider in that regard and represents a large chunk of the Catholic population. More than 30% of the Catholic population comes from the Americas. It's 40% from the Americas, 30% from Latin America. So he now really comes from where the church is vibrant, where the church is growing, and they're dealing with issues about poverty, about facing injustice, and those are the kinds of things that these kind of things are now front and center on the table.
Jeff, speaking about social issues, and Dignity, of course, is a Catholic group that represents Catholics of all sexual orientations, amongst other things. Right. Like many U.S. Catholics, according to the last U.S. poll by the New York Times and CBS News, Dignity, I assume, hoped to see actually a progressive choice, perhaps. Is this a surprise, and is this a disappointment?
Well, I mean, I think we're surprised, just as the Monsignor was saying, like everyone is. It was a little bit out of left field, but you know, we're encouraged by what we see of his pastoral approach, his focus on poverty, you know, his humble lifestyle, his pastoral style. We are aware that you know, Argentina is one of those countries that now has marriage equality, and the cardinal, as cardinal there, he spoke out very strongly against that, and some of those words are quite harsh.
I think he called it an anthropological throwback at one point.
Yeah, I've read various things, and so we hope that as he becomes Pope, the office often changes the man to some extent. We hope to see that he takes that pastoral style that he brings to, you know, issues of poverty and social justice, and he brings it to the issues of human sexuality. You know, we think it's a time for listening. We hope that there will be listening and dialogue, and we're ready to do that.
Monsignor, you minister here in New York and in Brooklyn, and so you know how American Catholics feel better than anybody. What is your message to American Catholics today who may see in this Pope more of someone much more in the mold of his predecessor, who was a conservative?
I actually minister in Washington, and as a Baltimore person, big rivalry against New York things. So you know, his pastoral instinct seems to be front and center in my mind. There was a story of him last year chastising some of his priests in Buenos Aires who refused to baptize infants of unwed parents. And he spoke very sternly about that. There's an image that's already circulating of him washing the feet of AIDS patients on Holy Thursday, one of our rituals of service and compassion, when he went out of his way to do that in a very profound gesture. And so I think his staunch defense of the faith is tempered by his pastoral instincts. He's been a bishop of a diocese for a long time. He's been a teacher. He worked with seminarians when he was a Jesuit. He still is a Jesuit in some ways. So he's got a diverse background as a teacher, as a formator, as a pastor. And I think, and I hope that will be the instinct that drives him as he moves forward.
And you hope those two things together can kind of reach out and speak to American Catholics who don't always agree with the Vatican on theology.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think we'd be seeing any sweeping changes. A new pope doesn't just come in and suddenly change the teachings of the church. And it's important to remember that he wasn't running for office in the same way that we would see a candidate run on a platform and say, these are my issues. And so the cardinals weren't electing him because he had plans to do certain things. He probably doesn't have any idea beyond wanting to be, striving to be a holy, prayerful person about what he's going to do yet.
Jeff, what do you hope you'll see in the actions and the words of this Pope initially?
I hope that we do see a pastoral approach to some of these issues that have really divided the church, these social issues, marriage equality, gender equality, women's ordination. As the Monsignor said, the new Pope is known as a staunch defender of the faith, but I think it's time for an examination of what is the core of our faith and what are the more peripheral issues. I think a lot of theologians would really consider a lot of these social issues, these sexual issues particularly, to be not really at the core of the faith. They're sort of peripheral teachings. They've assumed huge importance because of what's happening in our societies. But they are dividing the church, and it's not just a question of sort of the church giving in to secular whims or secular trends. I mean, these are deep social justice issues that have been developing for decades and centuries, and I think they've sort of reached fruition now. And I hope that this Pope will sort of open the dialogue. No, a Pope doesn't come in and just overturn everything, but massive changes can occur, as they occurred back in the early 60s when Pope John XXIII came in and started Vatican II, and no one expected that.
A final question for both of you. Are you concerned about a possible division between the global north and the global south, the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere, as kind of the church increasingly does look toward the south, which is socially profoundly more conservative?
I think here in America, so much, our Catholic population in the United States is growing in part because of the influence of immigrants coming from Central and South America. So, and there's really been a movement among Catholics to really see the Americas as one, not block, but one unified part of the church. And we live in a global society, and I think the present state of the College of Cardinals being more diverse, and the fact that they've looked beyond Western Europe for the first pope from outside Europe in modern times, says that there's this recognition that we are a boundaryless church in some ways.
Yeah, I don't see that happening, Marcus. And I think the perception that Latin America is more conservative in a lot of ways is in some ways accurate, in some ways not. I mean, here you have Argentina, an overwhelmingly Catholic country in the heart of Latin America that just passed marriage equality a few years ago. You look at surveys of Latino Catholics in the United States, and they are even more favorable toward marriage equality than non-Latino Catholics, who are in the majority as favoring marriage equality. So I think I don't think there's a division. I think it's a wonderful thing that he's from the Americas, that he's from the global South. We're very interested in these issues of poverty and inequality, just like all our fellow Catholics are. So, we look forward to what he has to say.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you both for coming in this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you.
That's all for now. I'm Marcus Mabry for the New York Times.